Hello everyone, welcome to Reading in Philippine History. In this video, we are going to discuss about the taxation, and under taxation, we have the Filipino cultural heritage and Filipino-American relations. First, the taxation. What is tax? Taxation is defined in many ways. Commonly heard definition includes the process which the sovereign, through its law-making body, raises revenues used to defray expenses of government. It is the collection of the share of individual and organization income by a government under the authority of law. Taxation is a term for when the taxing authority, usually government, levies or imposes a financial obligation on its citizens or residents. Taxation is the system by which a government takes money from people and spends it on the things such as education, health, and defense. The act or principle of levying taxes or the condition of being taxed. Levying or levies is a legal seizure of property to satisfy a tax debt. Concept of tax. Taxation is the inherent power of the state to impose and demand contribution upon person, properties, or rights for the purpose of generating revenues or public purpose. The power of taxation upon necessity and inherent in every government or sovereignty. Classification of taxes. As to subject matter in taxes, we have the personal, pool or capitation, tax of a fixed amount on individual residing within a specified territory, within regard to their property, occupation, or business. Example for this one is community tax. Second one is property, imposed on property, real or personal, in a proportion to its value or in the accordance with some reasonable method or appointment. Real estate tax is the example of property. Excise, imposed upon the performance of an act, the enjoyment of a privilege, or the engaging in an occupation, professional, or business. The example for excise are the income tax, value-added tax, state tax, and donor's tax. Who bears the burden? Of course, they are the taxpayers. We have two kinds, the direct and indirect taxpayers. Direct taxpayers, the tax is imposed on the person who also bears the burden thereof, income tax, community tax, and state tax. Indirect taxpayer, imposed on the taxpayer who shifts the burden of the tax to another. The examples are the value-added tax and customs duties. Determination of account in taxes. We have the specific tax, imposed and based on a physical unit of measurement as by head number, weight, length, or volume. The examples are the distilled spirits or liquor, fermented liquor, and cigarettes. Imposing tax in distilled liquor and fermented liquor is different. Ad valorem tax, of a fixed proportion of the value of the property with respect to which the tax is assessed. The examples are the real estate tax, excise tax on cars, and non-essential goods such as jewelries and gadgets. Purpose of tax. The general fiscal or revenue imposed for the general purpose of supporting the government. The examples are the income tax and percentage tax. Income tax table under the Train Law. Special or regulatory, imposed for a special purpose to achieve some social or economic objectives. The examples are the protective tariffs or custom duties on imported goods intended to protect the local industries. Distinction of tax from other terms. First, we have the tax distinguished from tool. A tax is a demand of a sovereignty, while tool is for demand for proprietorship. A tax is paid for the use of the government's property, while a toll is paid for the use of another property. A tax may be imposed by the government only, while the toll is enforced by the government or the private individual or entity. Tax distinguished from penalty. A tax is intended to raise revenue, while a penalty is designed to regulate conduct. A tax may be imposed by the government only, while a penalty may be imposed by a government of a private individual. Tax distinguished from debt. A tax is based on law, while the debt is based on contract. A tax may not be assignable, while a debt is assignable. Tax is generally payable in cash, while debt payable in cash or in kind. Person may be imprisoned for a non-payment of taxes, but any person may not be imprisoned for non-payment of debt. Tax distinguished from other terms, we have the revenue. This refers to all the fund or income derived by the government, whether form of tax or any other sources in another sense. Internal revenue, it refers to taxes imposed by the legislature other than duties on imports and exports. Customs duties, they are taxes imposed on goods exported into country. Entities exempted from taxation. We have the religious institutions such as church, mosques, and parsonage, charitable institution, non-profit, non-state educational institution, non-profit cemeteries, government institution, and foreign diplomats by the virtue of Treaty Art 15, Section 3 and 4, 1987 Constitution, Art 7, Section 28, Part 1. Situs of taxation. Situs is Latin term which means situation, location, or place. Its literally meaning refers to place of taxation. In real property, the rule is tax is imposed to place or state such as city, municipality, or province where the property is located. Subject to be taxed has a jurisdiction over the said property. In movable property taxation, the rule is mobilia secundir personam, a Latin term or phrase which means movables follow the law person. It gives us idea that the place or state wherein your property is located has a jurisdiction in imposing the payment for property tax. Concept of double taxation. The two concepts of double taxation are the direct duplicate and indirect duplicate. Indirect duplicate has the following elements: taxing twice by the same taxing authority within the same purpose for the same purpose in the same taxable period and involving the same period. Forms of escape from taxation. There are 6 forms of escape from taxation. First, the shifting is one way of passing the burden of tax from one person to another. There are kinds of shifting. We have the forward shifting, occurs when the burden of the tax transferred from a factor of production to the factor of distribution. Backward shifting occurs when the burden of tax is transferred from a factor, the consumer, to the producer or manufacturer. Onward shifting occurs when the tax is shifted to 2 or more times either forward or backward. Capitalization. This refers to the reduction in the price of tax object to the capitalized value of future taxes which the purchaser expects to be called upon to pay. Transformation occurs when the manufacturer or producer upon whom tax has been imposed pays the improving his or her process of production. Tax evasion is the practice by the taxpayers through illegal or fraudulent means to defeat or lessen the amount of tax. This is known as tax dodging. Tax avoidance is the exploitation by the taxpayers of legally permissible method in order to avoid or reduce taxability. This is known as tax minimization. We have the tax exemption. is the grant of immunity or freedom from a financial charge or burden to which others are subjected. These are the grounds of exemption. We have the contract, wherein the government is the contracting party, public policy, and reciprocity. Now let's go to Filipino cultural heritage. What is heritage? According to Christopher Tonard, it is the cultivation of cultural patrimony. According to Leo Yuan, it is as much about people as it is about relics, and the challenge is to balance preservation with modern day realities. Heritage or pamana is anything that one's value. Cultural heritage according to Republic Act No. 1006 or the National Cultural Heritage Act of 2009, cultural heritage refers to the totality of cultural property preserved and developed through time and passed on posterity. The word heritage explains that heritage is our legacy from the past, what we live with today, and what we pass on to the future generations. The World Heritage List includes 6 Philippine properties. We have the Tubataha Reef National Marine Park, the rice terraces of the Philippines Cordilleras, historic city of Vigan, Puerto Princesa Subterranean National Park, Baroque churches of the Philippines such as Santo Tomas de Villanueva in Miaglao, Iloilo, San Agustin in Pauay, Ilocos Norte, Nuestra Señora de Asunción in Santa Maria, Ilocos Sur, and San Agustin in Intramuros, Manila. The 6th property is the recently included Mount Hamigitan Range Wildlife Sanctuary in Davao Oriental. It is important to keep in mind that there are 2 types of heritage. One is tangible heritage, consisting environment such as natural landscape, the indigenous flora and fauna, and historic man-made structures. Meanwhile, the intangible heritage consists of tradition and living expression that constitute a culture and worldview. As mentioned earlier, tangible heritage includes our indigenous flora and fauna and natural landscapes such as the Philippine Eagle and Chocolate Hills in Carmen, Bohol. Here are other examples of tangible heritage. The urban heritage site like Vigan City and the oldest dated house in Philippines is the 1730s Jesuit house in Cebu. Another example is the Santo Tomas de Villanueva Church in the town of Miaglao, Iloilo. Its architectural design is primarily earthquake, Baroque with the large butcheries that can withstand constant seismic activities on the island. Another example of tangible heritage is the costumes. Note for the example the depiction of Filipino in Justiniano Asuncion watercolor paintings in Tipos del Paes in 1841, and see which garment is still worn today. The textile or fabric used is also part of our tangible heritage. Wood carvings such as those in Paete, Laguna are also considered our tangible cultural heritage. What about the Philippine literatures? Are they tangible or intangible? Literatures is tangible heritage in form of culture of codified text, such as the Noli Me Tangere, El Filibusterismo, Mga Ibong Mandaragat, and the Kathang Buhay. Because of literatures includes the oral tradition, fully narrative and epics, which are often chanted or sung, constitute our intangible cultural heritage. Nowadays, scholars document the text to preserve these literatures. Another examples of intangible cultural heritage is the cuisine. Doreen Fernandez explains why studying Philippine food helped trace the continuous of Filipino history and identity. Language is also intangible cultural heritage as it speaks about our cultural past. Take for example the fact that the pre-Spanish Filipino believes that the liver or atay was the set of emotions and it is called in the other Philippine languages as atay, ate, hatay, hati or ati. That is why in Tagalog emotions is dalamhati and intense feelings or grief, yearning and happiness are pighati, lunggati, and duwalhati. Article 1 Policies and Principles Section 2 of National Cultural Heritage Act of 2009 declares that the state shall be foster the preservation, enrichment, and dynamic evolution of a Filipino culture based on the principles and unity in diversity in a climate of free artistic and intellectual expressions. According to the Heritage Conservation Society, entails all the processes and measures of maintaining the cultural significance of a cultural property, including but not limited to preservation, reconstruction, protective, adaptation of any combination thereof. The following are the institutions, entities, and laws that aim for the preservation and enrichment of our cultural heritage, tangible and intangible. The Historic Preservation of Division under the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, National Commission for Cultural and the Arts or the NCCA, the Non-Government Organization, Heritage Conservation Society, Republic Act No. 1006 or the National Heritage Act of 2009, Act providing for the protection and preservation of the natural cultural heritage, strengthening the NCCA and its affiliated cultural agencies and the other purposes. We as a people benefit from the conservation of our culture as they define who we are. When cultural heritage is appreciated, enhanced, and enriched, sociocultural, religious, political, and economic gains are manifested. The values of cultural heritage is seen in the strengthening of the sense of national regions and local identities, which the external benefits as part of the educational and acculturation of the young. This is the summary of Filipino cultural heritage. Cultural heritage refers to the totality of cultural property preserved and developed through time and passed on to posterity. The Philippines is enriched with cultural heritage that needs to be protected and preserved. Cultural heritage may be tangible or intangible. It is important that a cultural heritage is appreciated so that enhanced and enriched socioculture, cultural, religious, political, and economical gains are manifested. Now we are here at the Filipino-American relations. Today, Americans' influence in the Philippines are still apparent. How do Americans' influence affect our culture? Let us review. The Treaty of Paris, signed on December 10, 1898, transferred ownership of the Philippines from Spain to the United States at the cost of $20 million. Tidings-McDuffie Act or the Philippine Independence Act defined the establishment of a formal Philippine Constitution by a Constitution Convention. Through the 1935 Constitution, the Philippines from 1935 to 1946 adopted a Commonwealth government which served as the transitional administration that would prepare the country for its independence. On July 4, 1946, the United States granted the Philippines its independence but on certain conditions. The U.S. colonization of the Philippines couched in President McKinley's benevolent assimilation, which meant that U.S. domination was all for civilizing the Filipinos. The mission was considered the white man's burden. Examine the political cartoon published in 1899, in which a white man is bathing a Filipino child in a pool of civilization. One would be, of course, to note that the child holding a spear looks more Polynesian than any other indigenous groups in the Philippines. Why do you think is that? The US also introduced the public school system, especially through the 600 American teachers aboard the USS Thomas in 1901, known as the Thomasites. They would teach young Filipinos the English language and with it, the American culture. At the height of the Philippine-American War, the retaliation of the assassination of the American troops in Balangiga, Samar, the United States General Jacob Smith ordered the military to kill everyone over the age of 10 and to make the island into a howling wilderness. The Balangiga massacre would become one of the grisliest war crimes. As war trophies, the American troops took 3 bells from the church of San Lorenzo de Martir and brought them to the United States. The US liberation of Manila during World War II left the city ruins, as the USAFFE or the USAF dropped bombs after bombs to expel the Japanese forces. A year later, in 1946, the Philippines was granted its independence. In 1947, an agreement was made to give the United States a 99-year lease for the continued operation of its military bases in the Philippines. The Mutual Defense Treaty was made in 1951, indicating support for each other in case the United States or the Philippines was attacked by an external party. The US military bases in the Far East were strategic location for the Cold War was ensured right after World War II. The Philippines became its strongest ally in fighting threat of communism or anything that resembles it. On Philippine soil, the United States sponsored the presidency of Ramon Magsaysay to quell the peasant, formed Hawk Rebellion. Aiding the Philippines government, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency or the CIA deployed a psychological warfare in which the Hawk rebels were made to believe that an aswang was hunting them. The U.S. maintained and operated the major bases such as the Clark Air Base until 1991. In historic Senate vote that rejected the treaty to extend the presence of the United States military bases in the Philippines. These are just examples of the continuous U.S. intervention in the Philippine affairs, despite the official declaration of the Republic independence. Filipino-American relations mainly focused on economic and commercial ties for a time. In 1996, President Fidel Ramos declared 4th of July as the Philippine-American Friendship Day. Visiting Forces Agreement (VFA) is a new agreement between the two countries to resume their bilateral military exercise and enhance defense cooperation. The U.S. conducted ship visits to the Philippine ports and combined military exercises with the Philippine military. VFA remains in place until both parties agree to terminate it. In 2002, President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo expressed support for the U.S. War on Terror and hosted the first Balikatan exercise, a yearly joint exercise of the Philippine and U.S. Army. Extended its war on terror in the Philippines, the U.S. sent its troops to Basilan and Zamboanga to hunt the Abu Sayyaf group. In 2014, President Benigno Aquino III signed the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement or the EDCA with the U.S. President Barack Obama. EDCA aims to promote peace and security in the region by reaffirming a relationship between the U.S. and the Philippines, improve interoperability of two countries' armed forces, promote the country's long-term modernization, maintain maritime security, and strengthening humanitarian assistance in response to natural disasters. This does not end America's political and military influence in the Philippines, though for a time, the joint U.S. Military Assistance Group handed military equipment to the Philippine Marine Corps. The EDCA agreement also does not allow any nuclear weapons to be stored in the Philippine territory. The agreement is effective for the period of 10 years unless otherwise terminated by either party. In his 2017 State of the Nation address, President Rodrigo Duterte demanded for the return of the Balanga Bells. The U.S. allowed the reparations provided that the transfer is in the national security interest of the United States of America. After 117 years, the bells was finally returned on 15th of December 2018. Duterte party insisted that the United States apologize for its atrocities in the Philippines and that the America treat the country as its equal sovereign, perhaps signaling a substantive change in our perception of the special relation with the U.S. On July 6, 2019, the 8th Bilateral Strategic Dialogue, the two countries assigned the Philippine and U.S. Alliance Fellowship. Founded by United States, the fellowship sends 2 Filipino scholars to the U.S. every year to study additional security and international relations. In lecture given by the writer Gina Apostol, she explores the Filipino ambivalent relations with the United States. The U.S. for being both an ally and nemesis is what she would call as our frenemy. These are the summaries in Filipino-American relations. The Treaty of Paris, signed on 10th of November 1898, transferred ownership of the Philippines from Spain to the United States at the cost of $20 million. Jones Law, or the Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916, declared the purpose of the U.S. to end its colonial rule over the country. Tidings-McDuffie Act defined the establishment of a formal Philippine Constitution by the Constitutional Convention. On 4th of July 1946, the Philippines was declared independence. Thank you for your time and listening. Sayonara.